The human diplomat had never felt a place so different from Earth. As he stepped off the sleek spacecraft, he was immediately struck by the alien city. The buildings shimmered with colors he had never seen before, and the air carried a strange, metallic scent that tingled his senses. Every surface glowed softly, and even the ground beneath him seemed alive, pulsating faintly with energy. He could see alien figures moving in the distance, tall and graceful, with eyes that reflected light, like precious gems. They watched him silently as he approached, their expressions unreadable. He was on a mission that carried immense responsibility. Humanity and the alien world had been in uneasy contact for years. Small misunderstandings had led to tension, and now he was the one tasked with opening a path toward trust and dialogue. His heart beat faster as he walked toward the central palace, the building of the alien queen. It was enormous, stretching higher than the tallest skyscrapers he had ever seen on Earth. The walls seemed to shift colors as he moved, almost as if they were alive and aware of his presence. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of the queen's authority. Guards lined the halls, standing perfectly still, their eyes following his every step. Their uniforms were elegant and intimidating, with sharp lines and colors that seemed to hum with energy. He knew these were not ordinary guards. They were highly trained, loyal to the queen, and capable of feats that humans could barely imagine. The diplomat had been briefed on them, but seeing them in person was another matter. Their presence made the room feel heavy, charged with an unspoken warning. One wrong move could have consequences beyond his understanding. When he finally reached the throne room, the doors opened with a sound that seemed more like a song than a mechanical noise. The room was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above and walls covered in materials that reflected light in waves. At the far end, seated on a throne that seemed to float slightly above the ground, was the alien, Queen herself. Her appearance was majestic, unlike anything the diplomat had ever imagined. She had skin that shimmered in shifting shades, eyes that glowed faintly with intelligence and curiosity, and a presence that radiated power. It was clear that she was in complete control of everything in the room. The diplomat bowed deeply, as was customary, though he felt almost childlike in comparison to her overwhelming presence. The queen regarded him silently, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. He felt the weight of her gaze, an intensity that seemed to peer into his thoughts. He remembered his training and forced himself to remain calm. This moment was delicate. Any misstep could close the door to negotiation before it even began. The queen's guards formed a semicircle around the throne, creating a wall of vigilance. Their faces were expressionless, but the diplomat could feel their awareness pressing down on him. He tried to focus on the mission, on the words he would need to say, but the sheer alienness of the environment made it difficult. Everything about this place was a reminder that he was an outsider. Yet there was also a strange beauty in the order and precision around him. The aliens moved with purpose, their movements almost like a dance. Then, unexpectedly, the queen raised a hand. The guards immediately stepped back as if a force compelled them to obey without question. One by one they left the room, disappearing behind sliding panels that closed silently. The diplomat froze, unsure if this was a trick or a genuine gesture. He had been trained to handle negotiations with cautious respect, but this sudden action caught him off guard. For the first time he was alone with the queen, without the watchful eyes of her elite guards. The room felt suddenly different. The weight of authority was still there, but the atmosphere was softer, more personal. The diplomat took a cautious step forward, aware that every gesture now mattered more than ever. The queen's expression shifted slightly, a hint of curiosity appearing in her glowing eyes. It was as if she were studying him, trying to understand the human standing before her. He realized that this moment was rare. She did not allow anyone this level of intimacy easily. He began speaking, choosing his words carefully. He explained the purpose of his visit, stressing peace, understanding, and cooperation. His voice sounded small against the vastness of the throne room, yet he spoke with sincerity. The queen listened quietly, her gaze fixed on him, unblinking and intense. The diplomat felt a mixture of fear and fascination. He knew that this was a turning point, that how he behaved in these next minutes could shape the future of human-alien relations. As he continued, he noticed subtle changes in the Queen's demeanor. Her posture relaxed slightly and her eyes softened. She did not interrupt, but her attention was full and focused. The diplomat realized that she was testing him, observing not just his words but his emotions, his honesty, and his ability to remain composed under pressure. He understood that this was more than diplomacy. It was a test of character, of empathy, and of courage. Time seemed to stretch. The diplomat spoke of shared goals, of mutual curiosity and respect, and of the potential for learning from one another. He could see the Queen's subtle reactions, tiny shifts in expression that revealed thought and consideration. He felt a growing sense of connection, a bridge forming in the silence between them. The moment was fragile, yet it was alive with possibility. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Queen's gaze softened further. Though she remained regal and commanding, there was now a trace of something more human in her eyes, a willingness to listen, to understand, and perhaps even to trust. The diplomat felt a small spark of hope. He realized that being alone with her was not a privilege of comfort, but a rare opportunity to communicate on a level that went beyond titles, guards, and protocols. As the first part of their encounter came to a close, the diplomat took a slow breath and prepared himself for whatever would come next. He had stepped into a world completely unlike his own, faced a ruler more powerful than he could have imagined, and survived the tension of being completely exposed. And yet, for the first time, he felt that real progress might be possible. The alien Queen had sent her guards away, and in that quiet, tense space a door had opened, a door that might lead to understanding, respect, and perhaps a future where humans and aliens could meet as equals. The diplomat knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, surprises, and tests that would push both species to their limits. But in that moment, he felt the thrill of possibility, the fragile hope of connection, and the gravity of being part of a story that could shape history. The room remained silent, filled with the quiet power of potential, as he took another cautious step forward, ready to listen, ready to learn, and ready to face the unknown. Being alone with the alien Queen was unlike anything the diplomat had ever imagined. The vast throne room, which moments ago had felt cold and intimidating, now seemed almost alive with quiet energy. The absence of guards made the atmosphere fragile and personal. He realized that this was not just a meeting about politics or trade. This was a moment where human and alien could meet on a level that was rarely allowed. The diplomat felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but alongside it was a strange sense of curiosity and wonder. The Queen remained seated on her floating throne, her eyes fixed on him. Unlike before, when her gaze had felt sharp and distant, there was now a trace of vulnerability. It was subtle, a softening of her posture, a slight tilt of her head, but it was enough to make the diplomat notice that she, too, carried burdens that were not often visible. She spoke, and her voice was melodic but firm, each word carefully measured. "You have traveled far to be here," she said. "Yet distance is not what makes this encounter rare. Few have ever been allowed to speak with me without witnesses. Few have ever been granted true attention." The diplomat swallowed, feeling the magnitude of her words. He knew that this was a moment of trust. She was giving him a chance to see her as more than a ruler, more than a symbol of power. "Your Highness," he replied respectfully, I'm honored to be here. I only wish to understand your people and to find ways for us to live in peace." The Queen's gaze lingered on him, and the diplomat felt as if she were reading not only his words but his thoughts. Then, almost quietly, she began to speak of her world, her people, and the weight of leadership. She told him how the throne was not merely a seat of power, but a responsibility that touched every life in her kingdom. Every decision she made had consequences that could ripple across generations. She spoke of pressure, of constant vigilance, and of the isolation that came with being the one everyone depended on. The diplomat listened intently, He had read reports and diplomatic briefings about alien leaders, but reading about it was nothing, like hearing it firsthand. There was honesty in her words that could not be captured on paper. He realized that behind the majesty and authority, she was as human in emotion and thought as anyone he had met on Earth. The room, filled with light and shimmering colors, seemed to pulse softly with her words, making him feel as if the very air carried the weight of her experiences. He began to understand the subtle ways her guards and advisors had influenced every interaction he had observed before. The Queen's isolation was enforced not only by protocol, but by necessity. Trust, he realized, was something she had learned to give sparingly. The diplomat understood that this private moment was more than a conversation. It was an opportunity to bridge a gap that formal meetings could never reach. He asked her about her people, about their hopes, their fears, and their expectations. She explained the complexity of their society, how individuals were valued for intelligence, creativity, and courage, and how unity was essential for survival in their sometimes harsh environment. She spoke of challenges her civilization had faced and the delicate balance she had to maintain between innovation and tradition. The diplomat was struck by how much her concerns mirrored those faced by human leaders, yet on a scale and with a perspective completely different from anything on Earth. As she spoke, the diplomat noticed the little things, the way her fingers hovered slightly above the throne's controls, the faint shimmer of her skin that seemed to react to her emotions, and the subtle shifts in her glowing eyes when she paused or emphasized a point. Each detail revealed more about her, about the person behind the crown, and each observation deepened the diplomat's respect. He realized that empathy, not just intelligence, would be essential to understanding her and building trust. For the first time he spoke of himself, not as a diplomat but as a human being. He shared stories of Earth, of people striving for peace, and of the mistakes humanity had made in its own history. The Queen listened without interruption, absorbing his words with a quiet intensity. The diplomat felt a connection forming, a fragile thread of mutual recognition that spanned the distance between their worlds. He realized that she too was curious about him, about humans, and about what he represented. There were moments of silence, long and thoughtful, where neither spoke but both seemed fully aware of the other. In these moments, the diplomat noticed the subtle rhythm of her breathing, the way the room seemed to respond to her presence. It was as if the walls themselves were listening, as if the very environment recognized the uniqueness of the encounter. He felt both small and significant at the same time, aware that this private dialogue could shape events far beyond the room they occupied. Then the Queen shared more personal thoughts, revealing fears she had never spoken aloud to advisors or guards. She spoke of doubts and uncertainties, of the loneliness that came with decisions that affected millions. She described the delicate balance of maintaining authority while remaining fair, the tension between progress and caution, and the struggle to ensure that her people could trust her leadership. The diplomat realized that this was a rare window into the inner life of a being who carried immense responsibility with grace and strength. He responded with honesty, acknowledging that humans too struggled with isolation and responsibility, though in different ways. He spoke of collaboration, communication, and the courage it took to lead with both conviction and compassion. His words were simple, but he chose them carefully, knowing that sincerity mattered more than elaborate rhetoric. The Queen nodded, occasionally a slight smile appearing that hinted at appreciation or recognition. The conversation continued, weaving between observations, questions, and shared reflections. Every exchange revealed layers of understanding and trust. The diplomat realized that progress in diplomacy was not measured by formal agreements alone, but by these moments of insight, of shared humanity, even with beings who were not human. He felt a growing sense of respect, and perhaps even admiration for the Queen, who bore the weight of leadership with wisdom and dignity. As their dialogue progressed, he noticed the subtle changes in the Queen's tone and posture. The ways she leaned slightly forward or gestured with hands that shimmered in the light. These were signals, he realized, of engagement and openness. He adjusted his own demeanor, speaking calmly, listening actively, and responding thoughtfully. He understood that this interaction was as much about energy and presence as it was about words. By the end of their conversation, the diplomat felt that he had glimpsed a side of the Queen that few outsiders ever saw, a leader who was not just a ruler but a thinker, a protector, and a being capable of introspection and empathy. For the first time, he felt a real possibility for understanding between their two worlds, a sense that connection could transcend species and culture. When the conversation paused, the diplomat took a deep breath and looked at her, sensing that this was only the beginning. Though the room remained vast and empty, it no longer felt intimidating. It felt like a space where dialogue and trust could grow, where ideas could be exchanged honestly, and where understanding could take root. He realized that what had started as a formal diplomatic mission had become a rare human moment, two beings alone together, exploring the possibilities of connection, respect, and shared insight. As he prepared himself for the next stage of the encounter, he carried with him a sense of awe and responsibility. He understood that moments like this could shape history, and that the bonds formed in private, away from eyes of guards and advisors, could be more powerful than any public agreement. And in that realization, he felt a quiet sense of hope, knowing that this encounter could change not just their relationship, but the relationship between their worlds. As the diplomat continued speaking with the alien queen, the conversation took a surprising turn. She leaned slightly forward, her glowing eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and caution. Then, in a voice softer than before, she revealed something that caught him completely off guard. There was a threat, one that endangered not just her people, but potentially entire neighboring systems. She spoke carefully, choosing words that conveyed urgency without causing panic. The diplomat felt the weight of the revelation settle over him. This was no ordinary discussion. He was being entrusted with knowledge that few humans or even aliens had ever known. The Queen explained that her civilization had faced challenges in the past, threats from outside forces that had tested their resilience. Some of these threats were external, such as rival species seeking dominance. Others were internal, conflicts within her own ranks that could destabilize her society if left unchecked. She emphasized that secrecy was crucial. The wrong information in the wrong hands could lead to disaster. The diplomat understood immediately the gravity of the situation. He was not just a messenger. He was now a guardian of knowledge, responsible for navigating a delicate balance of trust and discretion. He listened carefully, asking questions that showed his engagement and respect. He wanted to understand fully, not only for his own sake, but so that he could advise humans accurately and responsibly. The Queen responded patiently, explaining the subtleties of alien politics and alliances. She spoke of factions that could not be trusted, of territories under strict control, and of negotiations that had failed in the past due to misunderstandings. With every detail, the diplomat realized the complexity of her world and how much more intricate interstellar diplomacy was compared to earthly politics. Then she shared an even more personal perspective. She spoke of the burden of carrying the knowledge of threats that few others could comprehend. She described the sleepless nights, the constant calculations, and the emotional strain of ensuring her people's survival. The diplomat felt a profound respect for her. He realized that while humans often face challenges, they were nothing like the constant vigilance she maintained. Leadership in her world was not just about making decisions, it was about living with the consequences of every choice, every word, and every alliance. The diplomat offered his own insights, drawing on human experiences of negotiation, strategy, and compromise. He explained how transparency, honesty, and careful planning could sometimes prevent conflicts from escalating. The Queen listened intently, occasionally nodding or tilting her head in thought. He sensed that she valued not only his knowledge but also his perspective, seeing in him a partner who could understand the challenges she faced, even if he could never experience them firsthand. As the discussion deepened, the Queen began to reveal some of the failures of past negotiations. She spoke of allies who had betrayed her, of messages misinterpreted, and of moments when even a small misstep had escalated into a dangerous situation. The diplomat realized that she was testing him, not in the formal way of challenges or trials, but by sharing vulnerabilities. She wanted to see how he would respond, whether he could handle truth and uncertainty without panic. His calm, measured responses reassured her, and he could sense a growing trust between them. The Queen then described the current threat in more detail. It was subtle, not an outright invasion, but a danger that could weaken her people from within. She had noticed signs of unrest, subtle manipulations, and patterns that suggested someone or something was trying to gain advantage over her civilization. The diplomat recognized the familiar human concept of espionage and intrigue, but magnified on a scale he could barely imagine. The stakes were enormous, and he understood that any misstep in communication or action could have consequences far beyond what he had encountered in human diplomacy. He asked questions carefully, showing that he was thinking critically and analytically, but also respectfully. He did not push too far, understanding that she was trusting him with sensitive information. The Queen, in turn, appreciated his balance of curiosity and restraint. She explained how intelligence was gathered in her society, how decisions were weighed, and how information was carefully verified before any action was taken. She emphasized that rushing to conclusions could be disastrous, a lesson that resonated deeply with the diplomat. For the first time, their conversation felt less like an official meeting and more like a true exchange of minds. The Queen shared her strategies for protecting her people, the ways she monitored alliances, and the methods she used to detect deception. The diplomat was fascinated by her insights, realizing that her world, while alien, had parallels to human society in terms of leadership, loyalty, and trust. He noted how her approach was precise and calculated, but also deeply humane in its consideration of lives and well-being. Then came a moment of quiet reflection. The Queen looked at him with glowing eyes, filled with something almost like vulnerability. "Few outsiders have ever understood this," she said softly. "Few have seen that leadership is not just power, but responsibility, and not just responsibility, but loneliness." The diplomat felt a surge of empathy. He understood what she meant. The isolation of making decisions that affected countless lives, the constant tension between what was necessary and what was just. He spoke honestly about human experiences, about leaders who had faced criticism, fear, and doubt, yet had continued to strive for the greater good. He shared stories of cooperation, compromise, and lessons learned from mistakes. The Queen listened intently, and he could see that she was drawing parallels between her own world and his. For the first time, she seemed to consider him not just as a diplomat, but as someone who could think alongside her, someone who could offer perspective and insight that was grounded in a different, yet relatable experience. As the dialogue progressed, the diplomat realized that this moment was more than a conversation. It was a test of empathy, judgment, and understanding. The Queen was not only sharing information but also observing how he would handle it, how he would respond to vulnerability, and how he would balance curiosity with discretion. He understood that trust was being built in real time, not through formalities or rituals, but through genuine exchange and mutual recognition. Finally, as the conversation drew to a temporary pause, the Queen's demeanor softened. She had shared secrets, insights, and fears that few others had ever known. The diplomat felt honored and humbled. He realized that being entrusted with such knowledge was both a privilege and a responsibility. He had not only gained understanding of a threat to her civilization, but also insight into the heart and mind of the Queen herself, a leader who bore immense burdens with grace, intelligence, and care. In that quiet moment, he felt a connection forming, a bridge of trust and understanding between human and alien. The room, once intimidating, now felt like a space where dialogue, empathy, and wisdom could grow. The diplomat understood that what he had experienced could change the course of relations between their worlds. The insights gained, the trust built, and the careful exchange of knowledge would shape not only the current negotiations but the potential for lasting cooperation and understanding. As he prepared to respond and continue their discussion, he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that diplomacy was not only about words, treaties, or strategy. It was about listening, understanding, and connecting. In that moment, alone with the alien queen, he glimpsed the profound possibilities of interspecies collaboration and mutual respect. He understood that knowledge, empathy, and discretion were the tools that could turn this fragile moment into a foundation for a future where their worlds could coexist peacefully, learn from one another, and face challenges together. The diplomat took a deep breath and prepared to continue. He knew that the conversation would become even more delicate, more revealing, and perhaps even more dangerous. But he also knew that the connection they had begun to build could guide them both through the uncertainties ahead. The alien queen had trusted him with her secrets, and he was determined to honor that trust, fully aware that the choices he made in the next moments could shape history in ways neither species had ever imagined. The room remained silent for a few moments after the queen's revelations. The diplomat could feel the intensity of her gaze, not as a ruler observing a visitor, but as a leader testing the very character of the person before her. He knew that this was a moment of judgment, a quiet assessment of his honesty, judgment, and courage. The queen had shared information few outsiders had ever known, and now she was observing how he would respond. Each gesture, each word, each pause mattered more than ever. The diplomat thought carefully before speaking. He acknowledged the gravity of what she had shared and expressed both his respect and his willingness to act thoughtfully. He explained that humans valued discretion and careful consideration, that sometimes acting too quickly could worsen a situation rather than improve it. The queen listened quietly, her posture straight but her glowing eyes studying his every expression. The silence between them was almost as powerful as their words, a measure of trust being weighed. As he spoke, he realized the delicate balance he had to maintain. He was not only representing humans, but also safeguarding the confidence the queen had placed in him. He could not reveal everything he had learned immediately, yet he also could not appear evasive or untrustworthy. Each sentence needed careful calibration, and he felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety at the challenge. This was diplomacy on the most personal and intense level he had ever experienced. The queen, sensing his thoughtful approach, leaned slightly forward. She asked questions that seemed simple on the surface but carried deep implications. She wanted to see how he reasoned, how he considered consequences, and whether he could maintain integrity under pressure. The diplomat realized that these questions were not merely informational, they were a test of character. How he responded would determine not only how she viewed him, but potentially how humans would be seen by her people in the future. He answered each question with care, drawing on experience, logic, and empathy. He acknowledged the complexity of her challenges and admitted when he did not know the answer, demonstrating honesty. The queen nodded subtly at times, her expression unreadable yet slightly softened. The diplomat sensed that she valued his humility and his ability to balance courage with caution. In that quiet space, without the presence of guards or advisors, the true measure of his capability was being revealed. Time seemed to stretch. The diplomat considered the moral dilemmas she had presented, decisions that had far-reaching consequences, moments when the right choice might not be the safest one. He realized that leadership, whether human or alien, was not simply about authority or control. It was about responsibility, empathy, and foresight. He reflected on moments in human history when leaders had faced similar dilemmas, drawing lessons from both success and failure. The queen observed him as he spoke, testing not only his words but the honesty and depth behind them. She asked him hypothetical questions, presenting scenarios in which he would need to weigh immediate action against long-term consequences. The diplomat considered each carefully, offering solutions that balanced caution with initiative, strategy with ethics. He could see her studying his thought process, analyzing not just what he said but how he approached the challenge. In turn, the diplomat asked questions of his own. He wanted to understand not only the threat she had revealed but also her decision-making process. He asked how she determined whom to trust, how she prioritized actions, and how she balanced the needs of her people with the greater responsibilities of leadership. She answered openly, revealing her strategies and the principles that guided her. He recognized the immense pressure she faced, the constant need to make choices that affected countless lives, and the delicate balancing act that required wisdom, patience, and courage. As their dialogue continued, the diplomat felt a growing sense of connection and understanding. He realized that this was a rare moment where two beings from entirely different worlds could meet on equal footing, sharing insights and testing perspectives without the barriers of fear or protocol. Trust was being built in real time, not through ceremonial gestures or formalities, but through dialogue, thoughtfulness, and the careful weighing of decisions. The queen shifted slightly in her throne, a gesture that seemed to signal approval or recognition. She shared stories of previous leaders who had failed under pressure, moments when pride or rash decisions had led to disaster. The diplomat listened attentively, appreciating both the lessons and the candor. He realized that the queen's ability to reflect on the past and share these lessons with him was an act of trust in itself. Few humans had ever been allowed such insight, and he felt the weight of that privilege. He responded with honesty, sharing parallels from human leadership, times when decisions had been difficult, and lessons learned from mistakes. The queen absorbed his words, and he could see her considering the similarities and differences between their worlds. In that moment, he felt a bond forming, one built on respect, understanding, and the recognition that leadership, while different across species, carried universal challenges. Eventually, the conversation turned to practical considerations. The queen asked how he might advise humans if such threats ever reached Earth, what principles they could use to navigate complex situations, and how humans might foster cooperation rather than conflict. He offered thoughtful responses, drawing on experience, empathy, and logic. She listened closely, evaluating his ability to translate insight into action, to turn understanding into effective decision-making. By the end of their private discussion, both the diplomat and the queen had learned from each other. The queen had tested his judgment, integrity, and composure. The diplomat had gained unparalleled insight into her world, her challenges, and the delicate intricacies of leadership in her civilization. The trust between them, though still fragile, had been strengthened. He understood that the choices he made next, both in conversation and in action, could influence the future of interspecies relations in ways few could predict. As the first rays of alien light shifted through the throne room, the diplomat prepared to continue the dialogue. He knew the queen would soon summon her guards back, but he also realized that the lessons and insights from this private encounter would stay with him long after the meeting ended. This was a moment of transformation, not just for negotiations, but for the understanding of leadership, trust, and empathy between two very different worlds. The diplomat took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. He felt the quiet thrill of possibility, the sense that his actions, words, and careful choices could help shape a future where humans and aliens could meet not just as representatives of their civilizations, but as allies, partners, and equals. The queen had tested him, and in that testing, he had discovered the true importance of character, patience, and understanding.